I was reading an article this week about what's happening in the whiskey industry. Just a few years ago, distilleries couldn't make whiskey fast enough. Demand for whiskey climbing every day, and new distilleries were opening across the country, chasing that same demand, all betting that people would keep wanting more. And barrels of aging whiskey had become valuable enough that some distilleries were even using their aging barrels as collateral for loans because everyone believed the market would keep climbing. Today, that conversation sounds completely different. Demand for whiskey has slowed down. Several distilleries have closed, and there are more barrels than buyers. But the interesting thing is that on a balance sheet, those same barrels that were being used as collateral on loans are now worth considerably less than they were just 2 or 3 years ago. But somewhere in the middle of that article, I stopped to think about where those barrels actually are right now. If you've never been inside of a rickhouse where whiskey ages in barrels, it's worth picturing. Imagine thousands of barrels stacked floor to ceiling in a dimly lit warehouse. Almost no sound, just wood and time, and whiskey quietly becoming what it was always intended to become. Every one of those barrels represents a decision a distiller made years ago. The grain, the water, the barrel itself, all of it aimed at something they believed when they made it would be worth a great deal by the time it was ready. And now, regardless of what someone says those barrels are worth in the market, the barrels are still aging, still becoming what they were intended to be, a great whiskey. Meanwhile, buyers and sellers outside those walls are negotiating numbers that have nothing to do with what's actually happening inside the barrel. That idea of two very different opinions of what a barrel of whiskey is worth is something I keep thinking about. Not because of what it says about the whiskey, but because of what it might reveal about us. Welcome to Craft to Clarity. I'm Steve Biscotto. This week, I wanted to spend some time on something happening in the whiskey industry right now. Barrels of whiskey that were worth a great deal 2 years ago are being worth considerably less today, even though the whiskey inside is literally becoming better with age. But this isn't really a conversation about whiskey as much as it's a story about what happens to any of us. Leaders, organizations, anyone who's built something, when the world's opinion of what we're worth changes faster than we do. So that's where we're headed. An honest look at what happens when someone else's number starts to feel like the truth about us. To understand how a barrel of whiskey gets priced, it helps to know how whiskey actually gets priced in the first place. There's no fixed formula. A barrel's worth depends on many factors, including how long it's been aging, which distillery made it, how much of it exists relative to how many people want it right now, and honestly, just what a buyer is willing to pay in this particular season. Two people can look at the exact same barrel and value it completely differently. That's not a flaw in the system. That's just what a free market is. An ongoing negotiation between how much of something exists and how badly people want it. A collector might pay $400 for a bottle because of which distillery made it, or how old it is, or a story attached to it that has nothing to do with what's actually in the glass. Someone else might taste the same pour and honestly prefer the $40 bottle that's sitting right next to it. Maybe they like more rye in the mash bill, or a lower proof, or just a different flavor profile entirely. Neither of them is wrong. They just value different things. Which is why part of this conversation is worth noting. A few years ago, whiskey couldn't be made fast enough, Now, there's more of it than the market wants, and prices are dropping because of it. While this sounds like bad news, for whiskey lovers, it's actually good news. Some of those bottles that we couldn't get a few years ago are now more easily found in our favorite stores, and in many cases, at a price that's more affordable than it used to be. The same oversupply that's hurting a distillery's balance sheets is the same oversupply that's about to put well-aged whiskey on the shelves at prices that weren't realistic just a few years ago. Same barrels, same whiskey, but two completely different realities of what's happening, depending on which side of the transaction you're standing on. And none of this is random. A distiller doesn't fill a barrel and just hope. Years before that whiskey is ready, the distiller has already made a long list of decisions. Which grain, which water, which barrel, how long he needs to age it. Every one of those decisions is aimed at something specific. A whiskey they believe, based on everything they know about the craft, is going to be worth having. And that's not a guess. It's closer to a conviction. They've tasted enough of their own work and enough of everyone else's to know what good whiskey requires. So when they put that barrel away, they're not crossing their fingers. They're confident in what they're making. But here's what the distiller doesn't get to decide and what's out of their control. They can do everything right. Choose the best grain, the cleanest process, manage the exact time the whiskey needs to age, and the year it finally comes out of the rickhouse. The market might be flooded by then, or thirsty, or somewhere in between. None of that has anything to do with what the distillers made is worth having, but it does have everything to do with what the world happens to want the moment it's ready. The craft and the market's response to it are two completely different conversations, and the distiller only gets to control one of them. So back to today. The market is giving an answer not even the most experienced distillers fully expected. During the boom a few years back, barrels of whiskey started to look more than just like inventory. They started to look like an asset. Some distilleries began using barrels as collaterals for loans, the same way you might borrow against a house or an investment account. Because everyone assumed a barrel sitting in a rickhouse would continue to increase in value over time, well, it sounded like a good idea. And for a while, that was true. The prices of whiskey were going up and demand remained high. But then things started to change. Demand began slowing down while new barrels were added to the supply. Distilleries built during the boom kept producing at boom-era pace. And now, those same barrels that were pledged as collateral, valued on paper at boom-era prices and numbers, well, they're now considerably less than the loans made against them that they assumed that they'd be worth. It turns out that whiskey is great in a glass, but it isn't the best collateral for loans. It can't be sold quickly, and its value depends entirely on what buyers are willing to pay in a specific season, not the season everyone predicted when the loan was made. And once a bank is actually holding whiskey instead of cash, well, they start doing their own math, separate from anything happening in the open market. There's a real difference between what a barrel is worth sitting quietly in a rickhouse with no pressure on it, and what it's actually worth the moment someone needs to turn it into cash. What changed wasn't the whiskey. What changed was the number someone assigned to it. In other words, the market changed. The whiskey didn't. And I think Most of us have lived some version of this, even if we never used the terms like valuation and worth. Think about what happens when a new leadership arrives, a new board chair, a new CEO. A company gets acquired, and suddenly there's someone new deciding what matters. Nothing about the people who were already there changed overnight. Their contributions are exactly what they were the week before. Their experience didn't disappear over the weekend. But the criteria might have changed. New leadership could now be measuring something different than the old leadership measured. Maybe the new leadership values speed over tenure. Maybe they're simply asking different questions than anyone asked before. A change in leadership can often bring a change in valuation. What is being seen as valuable, even if nothing else has changed, simply because the measurement has changed. It's not only leadership changes that do this. Think about a skill that was in high demand for 15 years. The thing you built a career on that isn't being asked for anymore. You didn't get worse at it, but the season that valued it the most has passed. Maybe AI is now doing in seconds what used to take you years of experience to do well. Or think about that role that you've done well for years, and then one day it's just not needed the way it used to be. Someone younger, or cheaper, or working remotely is doing part of it now. None of those things are a verdict on what anyone actually built or became. They're just a different season's math. When someone changes the number that they've assigned to you, it's incredibly difficult not to wonder if they changed the truth about you. I know this one personally. Early in my career, a nonprofit approached me to help with their marketing and strategy. Because they were a nonprofit, they wanted me to give them a nonprofit rate, a price that fit their budget versus what the work could actually produce for them. Because this was early after I started my company, I said yes. I wasn't desperate. In fact, working with them felt aligned, and I was truly excited to help a mission that I truly believed in. But somewhere in saying yes, I let go of something I actually believed about myself. That I solve important problems that lead to real impact. My price stopped being about what I could help them achieve, and instead being about what they thought they could afford. Unfortunately, this thought process didn't stay contained to that one relationship. I started carrying that same discount mentality into other conversations, wondering if maybe I'd always been asking for more than I was actually worth. Their number had become my belief. And it makes me wonder how many of us are carrying around numbers that were never supposed to define us. And it's just not leaders, as organizations do this too. A mission-driven organization usually starts out asking one question. What are we created to accomplish? Over time, different questions can take its place. What will investors reward this quarter? What will keep the board satisfied? What will the algorithm favor this month? None of those questions are bad questions. They're just a different measuring system than the one the organization actually started with. An organization can drift the same way a person can. One accepted valuation at a time, until no one remembers exactly when the question changed. And that's why I keep coming back to those barrels. The bank may value them differently today than they did 2 years ago. The market will assign them a different number next year. and a different one the year after that. None of that changes what's actually happening inside the rickhouse. The whiskey is still becoming what it was intended to be, whether this season's market recognizes it or not. If you've ever gone to a whiskey tasting, you know the pour comes first. You take it in before anyone tells you what to think about it. Here are 3 things worth sitting with from today's conversation. 1. A barrel's price and a barrel's craft are 2 very different conversations. The market can change its mind about what something is worth without a single thing about the thing itself changing. Where in your own life have you let a number stand in for something it was never actually measuring? 2. Drift rarely happens all at once. It happens the way it happened to me with that nonprofit. One reasonable sounding yes at a time, until a number that was never supposed to mean anything about your worth quietly starts to. Is there a yes that you gave somewhere along the way that quietly became a belief about yourself? And 3, the same thing that happens to a person can happen to an entire organization. A mission can slowly get measured by whatever the market rewards this quarter instead of what it was actually built to accomplish. If you lead a team or a company or even just a household, what's the question you started with? And is it still the question you're actually asking? If you want more conversations like this one, matched to whatever you're actually carrying right now, instead of what's trending, that's what Distill is for. You can search by what you're feeling, not by episode title, and it'll point you towards the conversations that fit. You'll find it along with everything else that we're building here at craftedclarity.net. I think about those barrels sitting in the dark, aging season after season, with no idea what anyone thinks they're worth this year, and not caring. The market changes. The whiskey doesn't. And I think it's true of more than just whiskey. Somewhere along the way, some of us have let a number someone else assigned to us start to feel like the truth. But all along, we are simply meant to keep becoming what we're intended to become, whatever the market happens to say about it in the season. So maybe the question we're sitting with this week isn't what you're worth today. It's whether you've let someone else's price stand in for it. Someone else may have decided your price. That was never the same thing as your worth. I'll meet you back here next time. And remember, clarity isn't found. It's crafted. If today's conversation resonated with you, don't let it end here. Visit craftedclarity.net to explore more conversations, reflections, and resources designed to help you distill the tension between what you built and what you're built for. You can explore the still, a curated experience that helps you find the right conversation for the season you're in, learn more about leadership experiences and facilitation through the work of the Distiller, or connect with me directly for a one-on-one conversation. But whatever you're navigating, you don't have to distill it alone. And remember, clarity isn't found. It's crafted.